Sometimes people ask me what my thoughts are on editing film photos. And my answer is always the same: I don't care what you do with it. In my opinion, everybody edits their photos. If you are DSLR scanning, or you are using a lab to scan your negatives, or even if you are going full-on darkroom printing, you're always editing your photos. On the other hand, I got some questions about how I edit my work. So I thought, let's make a full dedicated episode just about that. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk It Over. So what we got here are 5 photos that I pre-selected. 2 are from my trip to Italy and 3 are from our trip to Curacao. I did nothing yet to these photos. These photos are straight out of Negative Lab Pro. I'm not going to do any of that because I've already got a full episode about that. So if you want to see that, then I'll leave a link down below in the description. But let's get into editing my photos. And I'm not doing a lot to these photos because most of the time, straight out of Negative Lab Pro, I'm pretty happy with those, but sometimes I like to make some minor adjustments, and I also do some texture and sharpening in the end. So first I'll do some basic adjustments that I do on every single photo, and after that I'll show what I might do if I'm really not happy with the picture, or if I think something would be greatly beneficial to the photo. Most of the time I crop the raw image as close to the borders of the frame, so a lot of the times the image doesn't line up because I'm not that straight of a photographer, but in this frame it's perfectly fine. So what I would do in this situation is to maybe cool it down just a tad or warm it up. In my mind it was a little bit warmer, so I just go +3 on that and maybe +1 on the tint. Then I think I would lower the highlights a little bit, tone down the shadows a little bit, and the whites, because I don't really like my highlights to be directly in your face, if you understand what I'm saying. And maybe the black ones, get it up a little bit. Then for texture I usually just +10 it, clarity +10, and then I go to sharpening 80 most of the time. Yeah, this may be a little bit too sharp, but a lot of the time I just put it at 80. Maybe some saturation. If I think the image is too flat, I will add some saturation here, or I'll decrease it, but I think it's already fine, so I leave it at 0. So these are just some minor adjustments I do, and if you can see, it's not a lot. It makes the image pop a little bit more, but it's really not that much. After that I'll do some dust removal like this. I'll do this with what is this called? Brush healing tool, retouch. It's Q, and then I'll switch between these 3 if it doesn't work out. Normally I'll keep it at just this left one, and then I'll just take out any dust particles, which takes a lot of time because I don't clean my negatives beforehand. If these images only go to YouTube or Instagram, then I'll just stick to zooming in to 50%, because otherwise I'll be doing this for hours on every single frame, and sometimes I have hundreds of frames that I need to do, so I'll stick to 50%. I'm not going to do everything right now because that would make this video very boring. So normally I stick to 50%. If I'm going to print the work or it's work that goes to a client, then I'll definitely go to 100%, but 50% in most of the cases is perfectly fine. And that is really 99% of the time what I do with my negatives. So if you can see, it's not a lot of editing. It just makes the image pop a little bit more. Sometimes the image comes way too cool out of Negative Lab Pro. So sometimes you think, maybe this picture could have been better if the sky wasn't this flat. Like in this picture, it was way more saturated when I shot it, or you just want to change it. Then you can use something like the mask tool. And what I like to do for sky is a linear gradient, I think it's in English. And I do something like this. And you want to add some more blues to the sky. This is a little bit overdone, over exaggerated of course, but sometimes I think, okay, this is way too flat like this, so I want to add a little bit more saturation. But you can also, of course, darken it or brighten it up. Just depends on your taste. I think that this is perfectly fine, but maybe the sky could use a little bit more blue, which reacts nicely to the warmer tones of the rocks and the grasses. So that's something you could do. And as you can see, the difference is pretty big, but it's nice. So that's something you could do. And sometimes when I think, okay, those greens, like for instance in this bush in the front, aren't what I thought they were when I shot them. So then I just pick the color with this little thing here in Color Mixer, and I go to the greens. I hold the left mouse button and then I just go up or down, and I think the greens were much more vibrant than it's like this, or I think the greens were way more yellow, then I go like this. But I think, like I said before, the colors already look pretty natural to me, but maybe it's nicer if I give them a little bit more punch by increasing the greens. So there you have it. So if you can see, this is before, straight out of Negative Lab Pro, and after it's this, which pops a little bit more, has a bit more contrast to it, the sharpening, and of course the blue tones in the sky and the greens are looking a bit better to my opinion right now. So let's go to the next one, which is this one. Of course we're going to do the adjustments, the basic adjustments like before. I think it's a little bit too warm, so -7. The highlights are perfectly fine, but maybe add a little bit more. And the shadows are pretty okay where they are right now. As you can see, these are just minor adjustments to the picture. And then again, texture 10, clarity 10. Should we add a little bit more liveliness to this image? I don't know. I don't see any improvement, so I keep it at 0. And then we go again to sharpening 80. And this is at 50%, 100%. I like a more gritty, grainy look, so maybe for some people it's over sharpening, but to me it looks nice. Of course, we are going to get rid of all the dust specks and also the dirt on my window maybe, because it's not that pleasing to look at. But of course I'm not going to do this at 100%, so 50% is perfectly fine for what I'm going to do. And then I'm not going to waste too much time on this. So after that, of course, we can look back at the image and think, okay, is everything okay? The sky looks blue, better than in the first frame. So I think this one looks perfectly fine, but we can always try to see if there's something that we can improve on. Maybe if people think the sky is too blue, you can warm it up a little bit like this. But I think this one is perfectly fine. I wouldn't do anything much more to it. Now I'm not going to mess anymore with this image, so I would leave it at that. Let's go to the next one. This one is way more interesting color wise and dynamic range wise. So this is straight out of Negative Lab Pro, of course. Let's do some minor adjustments. I think the sky is a little bit too bright for my taste. I like to see those clouds in the sky, but I also like a lot of detail in the shadows. So I'm gonna up the shadows a little bit and decrease the highlights. Of course, add texture and clarity, and this one could have a little bit more color, like this. And of course sharpening, don't forget about the sharpening. Normally I just sync all the sharpening, texture and clarity together with all the frames that I'm doing, so I don't have to worry about forgetting about it or doing it each frame, but for this case it doesn't matter. What I think about this image is that it's a little bit too cool right now. I'll just add some warmth, but not too much. Like +4 is okay. As you can see, it's a little warmer. Well, what we can do in this image is a lot more. I think those clouds in the sky could have more potential if they are a little bit darker. So what we can do here is go to mask and select the sky. So as you can see, Lightroom does a pretty good job with only selecting the sky. It's not that precise, but we can see what we can do here. So if I lower the highlights, we can see that there's a lot more drama in the image. This is way too much, of course, but the clouds really add a lot to it. So we have to find a nice middle ground. I just want them to pop just a tad bit more. So maybe something like this. Let's see, this is before. Maybe too much. Like -10 maybe. I like minor changes. This is nice. But now again, I think this image is too warm. So I'll reset it and add maybe +2. Those clouds to me make a big difference in the whole image. What we can do now is add another mask and a linear mask and go something like this, because I think that this needs some more brightness. Yeah, it's maybe a little bit overdone, but this makes a lot of change to the whole image. You get the point. To the next one. I think every film photographer takes selfies like this all the time. Don't tell me I'm the only one. I think this image is a bit too cool, so I'm adding a lot of warmth. +5 is maybe enough. And then add +3 in the tint. Let's see. Yeah, that adds enough. I think we can use a little bit more highlights. The shadows are pretty hard because of the sun, of course. So we can up the shadows a little bit more. Add these. Can we use a little bit more color? I think so. +15 adds a lot of color in the background, but also to my skin tones. And then of course the sharpening again. Not a lot of dust here, but we can do something like this, of course. And I would be perfectly fine with an image like this. But here again, you can do changes to the sky maybe. If you reduce the highlights, the clouds become more present. Or if you don't want that, you can up the highlights. But I think a nice texture in the clouds is always nice. Don't overdo it, because if you do something like this, it's becoming a strange HDR photo. And I think the sky could be a little cooler, like -2. I think the greens look perfectly fine, but we can see if we can do anything more to it. Again, I will use this one. Just tap on the green and make it either greener, but I don't think that it was this green, so I'll make it Maybe something like this. Yeah, something like this is perfectly fine to me. What I can do in this image, because I haven't cropped it yet, I think if I crop it like this, it would look nicer. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe this is better. And for this final image, I immediately see something that I don't like, and that is that there's way too much blue in the sky. For some people it might be okay, but to me it's way too much. But first let's see if we can make this a little bit more straight, like this. I think the overall image is way too cool, so I'll add a little bit more warmth. +4 is enough for me. Let's add a little bit more highlight, because I think this part of the image could use a little bit more light. Bring up the shadows a bit. And of course add some texture and clarity. Do we have enough color? I think so. Definitely in the sky, so I keep this at 0. Go to details, sharpening 80, which is more than enough to me. And then we are going to address the blue colors in the sky, because they are way too much to me. But I like the colors in the rest of the image, so we are going to color mixer again. Go to color tone and add a little bit more of a deeper blue, but then again way too much saturation for my liking. Some people think, what the hell are you doing? Keep those blues intact, but I think it's way too much. I think this looks nicer. So this is before, after, before, after. But I think the overall image is still way too cool. So I'm going to +10, maybe. +10 on the warmth. I think this is perfectly fine to me. Of course, we're gonna remove some of the dust if we are going to post it or print it. And that's pretty much all of the editing I would do to this image. So now for the bonus one, let's go and open Photoshop, because this is how I post my images to Instagram. So I would open these images in Photoshop. And if you follow me on Instagram, you know that recently, or for the last couple of months, I really like to add a little small white border around my images. So I made a shortcut in Photoshop, which is Command F2, which does everything to me, resizing it for the perfect size for Instagram and adding the border. So that's Command F2 to me. And as you can see, everything is perfectly fine. This is 100%. And this works perfectly fine to me on Instagram. Just a small border, but I like framing my images if I print it or show it to people. So that's why I like to frame it also on Instagram. So this is for my horizontal pictures. So let's go back. So if you want to do this manually before you made the action, you can go to, I'll add some canvas, and I think it's 20 pixels wide and high. Yes, so as you can see, it adds a little bit a border, but now it's transparent. So what you can do is add another layer, make it white, and then of course add the photo to the top layer. You can do this also a little bit easier, just to resize the image like this, and then go to layer style and line, and then 20 pixels or 10 pixels. I think this is now 10 pixels, and then just add 10 pixels, but of course it crops a little bit of your image. There are 1,000 ways to do this, but I made an action long ago, which makes my life a lot easier. But for my vertical images, I want the same line on the side of the image, but because of the aspect ratio of Instagram is 1080 by 1350, it's 4:5. I'll just crop this image to these dimensions, 1080 by 1315. I'll go and check what I like. Maybe something like this. Go to resize. The width would be 1080, and I would copy this to my image like here. Then I would go to layer style line, add 10 pixels of border. And that is for my vertical pictures, because I like to have the same border on every single frame, also for my videos that I post. But this way the line stays the same on every single post, and we have this Instagram favorable 4x5 image. So that is how I like to edit my images. Not a lot. Sometimes I like to do a little bit more extra, like those layer masks, but that's really it. So there you have it. This is how I edit my work. Please let me know if this was helpful in any way, and I would love to hear about your editing style. For now, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you next week. Peace.